Remember that Darwin's theory of natural selection says that the species that are most fit for a particular environment will survive and reproduce. So as the environment changes, as the Earth changed over time, evolutionary patterns and processes occurred within the Earth's environment and within the things that existed in the Earth, the early forms of life that would eventually start to evolve to become what the biosphere contains today. In this lecture, we will learn to explain scientists' hypothesis about the origin of life, describe the theory that explains the origin of eukaryotic cells, and explain what fossils can reveal about ancient life. Think about how people have changed as a result of the technology that we now use. A 21st century teenager lives a very different life and thinks and acts very differently than teenagers did 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago. This shows that, this is sort of an example that our environment can shape how we live and how we develop. This is true not only with technology, but also with natural, physical, and environmental forces that occur on the Earth. Life is very complex, and the chemicals that make up life and living things are very complex. So a lot of people question whether they could have occurred naturally. In 1953, chemists Stanley Miller and Harold Urey tried to test the hypothesis that organic compounds could have been produced on early Earth. Miller and Urey first warmed water in a sterile flask. Sterile means that they made sure that there were no bacteria or other living things that could have been pre-existing on the glass. So they warmed some water in a sterile flask. Then they added methane, ammonia, and hydrogen to simulate Earth's early atmosphere. Remember, Earth was very different when it was forming, and early on in Earth's history, it had methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, not nitrogen and oxygen as we now know. Then they passed sparks through the gases to simulate lightning. On the early Earth, there was lots and lots of lightning. The liquid circulated through the experimental apparatus for a week, and the results were spectacular. The experiment produced 21 amino acids. Miller and Urey's experiment suggested that organic compounds necessary for life could have arisen from simpler compounds on a primitive Earth. Amino acids are those complex compounds that eventually combine to form proteins. We now know that Miller and Urey's ideas on the composition of the early atmosphere were incorrect. But experiments based on current understanding of the early atmosphere have also produced organic compounds. What's more, the discovery of such compounds on meteorites and comets has confirmed these lab experiments. How did Miller and Urey model conditions that existed on early Earth in their experiment? They used water to simulate the oceans, water vapor, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen to simulate Earth's early atmosphere, and then they used sparks of electricity to simulate lightning. What question did Miller and Urey's experiment seek to answer? could organic molecules assemble under the conditions that existed on early Earth? What were the results of their experiment? Amino acids and other organic compounds could have assembled under the conditions that existed on early Earth.